You know that feeling when you're standing in a modern art museum looking at a canvas that's maybe just splatters of paint or a couple of big blocks of color, and you just think to yourself, what happened, right? How on earth did we get from these super realistic classical portraits to this? Well, the answer isn't just about a new style of painting. It's about a world that was literally blown apart, and the story of how artists tried to piece it all back together.
And let's be honest, it's the question on everyone's mind. Why did art in the 20th century get so weird? It feels like it just threw realism and logic right out the window. It can look chaotic, maybe even a little nonsensical. But as we're about to see, it was anything but random.
And here's the key, the one thing to remember. Art didn't just get weird in a vacuum. The world got weird first. The chaos you see on the canvas, that's a direct reflection of the chaos people were actually living through. Art was just holding up a mirror to a reality that had been completely shattered.
So let's start with that first big break, World War I. See, before 1914, Europe had this deep belief in progress, in reason, in a certain kind of order. But the war, trench warfare, the industrial-scale slaughter, the absolute senselessness of it all, it didn't just kill millions of people, it killed an entire way of thinking. There's this writer, André Breton, who said that society was left psychologically scarred and wounded. And after that kind of trauma, the old artistic languages, pretty landscapes, noble portraits, they just felt totally inadequate. I mean, they were almost insulting. How do you paint a beautiful sunset after you've seen a mustard gas attack? You just can't. You need a whole new language.
And that new language, it began with a scream. And that scream was called Dada. This wasn't about making pretty pictures. Oh no. This was born from pure, raw disgust with the very society that had led the world into a meat grinder. And just listen to how one of its founders, Tristan Tzara, defined it. This wasn't some polite debate in an art gallery. It was a protest with the fists. It was meant to be destructive, and they were happy about it.
And what were they destroying? Well, basically everything. Logic, reason, social norms, the government, art itself. I mean, you can't get much more direct than Tzara's mission statement here. The entire goal was to tear down every single structure they thought had failed humanity so completely.
You can feel the energy in this, right? Abolition of logic, abolition of memory, abolition of the future. It was just a total, absolute rejection of everything, all in the name of one single thing: pure, chaotic, messy life. It was about smashing the machine just to feel something real again.
But, you can only scream for so long. After Dada had finished smashing the external world, a new question popped up. Okay, but what's going on inside our heads? And so, right from the ashes of Dada's destructive energy, Surrealism was born, and it turned the investigation inward.
Remember that writer, André Breton? Well, it turns out he was the leader of the Surrealists. And during World War I, he actually served as a neurologist, treating soldiers with shell shock. He saw firsthand what that kind of trauma does to the human mind. So, influenced by guys like Freud, he and the other Surrealists decided to explore that hidden world, the subconscious, the realm of dreams, and all our irrational thoughts.
Okay, so you've got Dada's rebellion and Surrealism's deep dive into the mind, and it's all bubbling up in Europe. But then, history deals another devastating blow, World War II. And this new catastrophe would shake everything up all over again, and this time it would literally move the entire center of the art world. You can really see the dominoes fall when you look at it like this. First, World War I kicks off Dada and then Surrealism in Europe. But then, boom, World War II forces this massive shift. The whole center of gravity for art moves to New York City, and that's where uniquely American movement, abstract expressionism, is born.
It makes sense, right? As Europe was burning, many of its most radical artists, the Surrealists and many others, fled to the United States, and they brought all their wild ideas with them. And in the safety and, frankly, the economic power of post-war New York, those ideas found brand new soil to grow in. The torch had officially been passed.
And that brings us to abstract expressionism. Now, this was the first truly American art movement to really take over the world stage. It took the psychological deep dive of Surrealism and pumped it full of American scale, American energy, and this really deep sense of post-war existential dread. So what's the big difference here? Well, you could say European Surrealism was about painting an illogical dream, but with a lot of precision. American abstract expressionism, on the other hand, was all about the feeling. It was less about the final image on the canvas and way more about the raw physical energy that went into making it. The canvas became, as they said, an arena for action.
Okay, so we're seeing all this chaos, this energy, this angst. It seems, well, loud, doesn't it? But here's where the story takes a really surprising twist. What if the real subject of all this seemingly chaotic art wasn't noise at all, but its exact opposite? What if this was all really a search for silence?
I mean, this quote from Mark Rothko, who's one of the giants of the movement, it just flips the whole idea on its head. For him, silence wasn't just empty space, it was a state of pure, perfect, accurate expression. That was the real goal.
And you can totally see this in his work. We talk about his bold colors, but actually, a lot of his most famous paintings are dominated by these muted tones. He used these huge fields of simmering color not to shout at you, but to do the opposite, to absorb sound, to create this enveloping, silent space that you could almost just fall right into.
Barnett Newman, he took this idea even further. Look at this. A huge chunk of his canvases were left totally unmarked. That empty space, that void, it wasn't just background, it was the subject. It was meant to give you this feeling of the sublime, a silence so big it just fills you with awe. But okay, the real test is Jackson Pollock, right? The king of chaos. But even here, if you look closely, it's not just noise. There's a real rhythm to it. All those frantic lines are balanced by these little moments of calm, these silent spaces on the canvas that let the whole painting breathe. It's like this perfectly orchestrated balance of crazy action and total stillness.
And that brings us right back to the beginning. Why were they all searching for silence? Well, because the world had become deafeningly loud. You had the trauma of 2 world wars, the dawn of the nuclear age, this constant hum of modern anxiety. So this art, it wasn't just expressing chaos, it was creating a refuge from it. It was building a quiet room in a very, very loud world.
So, the art that first seems so strange, so weird, it was actually one of the most deeply human responses to a world in crisis you could imagine. And it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? In our own chaotic age of information overload and constant noise, what does our art look like? And where do we go to find our own silence?